From the heart of Capitol Hill to the nation and the world, get the inside story with Capitol Insider.
Adam Schiff labeled Senator Kennedy a brainless Dixie puppet on a national broadcast. In a sudden twist, Kennedy began speaking flawless Mandarin, causing a stunned Schiff to instinctively reply in Chinese. Yet, that was merely the appetizer for what occurred when Kennedy clicked open a briefcase overflowing with hard proof. By the 38th minute, Schiff's lead counsel physically walked away from him while the cameras rolled. You won't believe which high-ranking Democrat stood up and declared, "I can't offer a defense for this any longer." This small-town attorney's retaliation remains the most brutal political demolition ever recorded. Senator Kennedy, your country bumpkin routine doesn't mask the fact that you're just a dim-witted Southern Trump sycophant playing lawyer. You are a disgrace to this legislative body. Adam Schiff's West Coast elitism saturated the entire hearing chamber. Senator John Kennedy took his time adjusting his spectacles, his Louisiana accent coming out as thick as chilled honey. "Well now, Congressman Schiff, my mother always told me that when someone labels you ignorant, the best response is to teach them. Today's curriculum focuses on your professional history. School is officially starting, and I'm waiving the tuition fees." The Senate Judiciary Committee room was packed to its breaking point. What was intended as a standard joint session on intelligence oversight had morphed into a high-stakes gladiatorial contest. Rumors had ripped through the Capitol that Schiff intended to socially liquidate Kennedy, the Republican known for his folksy metaphors. The visual discrepancy between the two men was overwhelming. Schiff walked in with a massive delegation, 3 attorneys, 5 aides, and 2 crates of perfectly filed paperwork. His designer suit was crisp, and his California complexion glowed under the studio lighting. He moved with the arrogance of a state prosecutor who had never lost a fixed trial. Kennedy walked in solo, clutching a single scarred leather case that looked like it had been through a flood. His attire was unremarkable, and his white hair slightly unkempt. To a random passerby, he looked like a lost grandfather who had stumbled into the wrong wing. The progressive media outlets crowded the press bench, phones poised to record the predicted downfall of another Southern conservative. CNN's headline banner was already set. "Schiff educates Southern senator on national security." Schiff launched the attack with his typical vanity, his voice dripping with suburban condescension. "Senator Kennedy," he started, emphasizing the title as if it were a joke, "your record shows a pattern of blocking intelligence improvements. You have labeled dedicated civil servants as deep state agents. You have backed a leader who undermined our very foundations. To be blunt, your outdated Southern viewpoints have no place in a serious conversation about global security." Kennedy remained still, meticulously polishing his glasses with a well-worn handkerchief. Schiff grew more aggressive, sensing no immediate pushback from the senator. "Perhaps if you spent less time crafting quirky sayings and more time reviewing security briefings, assuming you can grasp the material, you would see how outmatched you are." Several Democrats shared a quiet laugh while the journalists typed frantically. "And that accent," Schiff added with a smug grin, "maybe you could try to pick up the tempo. Some of us actually have real responsibilities to attend to today." Kennedy finally looked up, a thin smile touching his mouth. He leaned into his microphone, his Southern drawl becoming even more pronounced. "Well, Congressman Schiff, I truly appreciate your concern regarding my cadence. I might sound a bit slow, but at least I'm not growing a nose like Pinocchio." The room erupted as several people laughed, causing Schiff's face to turn a shade of crimson. "You see," Kennedy went on, "where I was raised, we have a saying, Don't start a fire you can't put out. But since you brought up my academic background, I suppose I should mention I managed to scrape by at Vanderbilt and UV Law. Oh, and then there was that other little school, Oxford University, over in England, as a Rhodes Scholar. The laughter died instantly as Schiff blinked in rapid succession. Kennedy reached into his old case and produced a thick, bound manuscript. Actually, I've been doing a bit of light reading myself lately. This right here is your Harvard Law graduation thesis on prosecutorial ethics. It's truly riveting material, Congressman. Page 47 is particularly enlightening. He reset his glasses and began to read aloud. A prosecutor who tampers with evidence or deceives the court betrays not only his position, but the entire pillar of our legal system. Those are your own words, sir. Shall we analyze how well you've adhered to them? Schiff's confident expression evaporated entirely. Now, you suggested I don't grasp intricate legal concepts, Kennedy continued. Let's see if I can fumble my way through this. You also doubted my familiarity with California statutes. Well, California Evidence Code Section 1040, subsection B, gives public entities the right to withhold official data if it harms public interest. You breached that specific statute exactly 17 times during your leadership of the Intelligence Committee. He recited the exact dates and specific infractions from memory, his drawl never faltering for a second. But, then again, I'm just a simple country attorney, Kennedy added with a touch of theatrical humility. What would I know about the legal codes of all 50 states that I've memorized just for the fun of it? The media section went dead silent. This was not the slaughter they had predicted, or at least not in the direction they expected. Schiff tried to regain his footing, stammering that memorizing laws didn't make one qualified for intelligence work. Speaking of intelligence, Kennedy cut in, reopening his briefcase. I brought some research along. 23 files, to be precise. Each one outlines what my grandfather would describe as pure devilment in your career. He began pulling out folder after folder, stacking them neatly on the table. Every label was clearly framed for the television cameras. Russia hoax, whistleblower collusion, illegal leaks, and China ties. Now, Congressman Schiff, Kennedy said, his voice sharpening into a legal edge while maintaining his Southern charm. You labeled me as ignorant and embarrassing. My mother taught me that when someone hurls insults like that, they are usually just looking in a mirror. So, let's put that hypothesis to the test, shall we? Schiff's legal team began whispering frantically to one another. The plan was falling apart. But first, Kennedy added, pulling out his smartphone, I want to show you something quite interesting. While you were busy mocking my intellect, the folks back home in Louisiana were tuning in, and they have some feedback. He flashed his screen toward the lens. His social media mentions were a tidal wave of support, while Schiff's feed was drowning in questions about the contents of those folders. It seems those backwards people understand something you don't, Congressman. They can smell a skunk in the tall grass from a mile away. And, sir, with all due respect, you're making the whole room stink. The committee chair, a Democrat who had hoped for an easy win, shifted uncomfortably. Gentlemen, perhaps we should return to the official agenda. Oh, I'm quite happy to focus on intelligence, Kennedy replied brightly. We can start by improving the intelligence of certain members who wouldn't recognize the truth if it bit them on their Ivy League behinds. Even a few Democrats couldn't hide their smirks at that one. So, what's it going to be, Congressman? Kennedy asked, gesturing to the stack. Do you want to keep talking about my ignorance, or should we discuss your professional conduct? I've got all day, and unlike some, I tell the truth even when I'm taking my time. Schiff's face shifted from red to a ghostly pale. His lead attorney leaned over and hissed something urgent into his ear. Let's begin with the Russia narrative, shall we? Kennedy suggested, reaching for the first blue folder. That seems to be where your complications started. Well, actually, they started when you skipped ethics class in law school, but Russia is where it became a public problem. He opened the file with the deliberate care of a man opening a gift he'd been saving. This is going to be more entertaining than a summer crawfish boil, Kennedy muttered, just loud enough for the mics. The predator had become the prey, and the slow-talking senator was about to show why you never judge a man by his accent. Now, Congressman Schiff, Kennedy began with theatrical slow motion. Let's revisit your famous claim that you held more than just circumstantial evidence of Russian interference. That was a bold statement. It reminded me of my uncle Beauregard, claiming he caught a fish the size of a boat. He pulled out a large, professionally printed timeline. The only difference is Uncle Beauregard actually had a photograph. You, sir, had nothing but hot air and a compliant media. By my tally, and keep in mind I'm just a simple country lawyer who can count, you misled the American public regarding Russia exactly 237 times. I had my staff verify it thrice. Schiff sat up straight in his chair, insisting he always maintained there was evidence. Oh, that's fascinating, Kennedy interrupted, reaching for a small digital recorder. Because I happen to have a recording from a closed-door session of your own committee. March 17, 2019. Would you like me to press play? Schiff's lawyers huddled in a panic, one whispering that the material was classified. It was classified, Kennedy corrected with a smile. It was declassified last month. It's funny how the truth eventually finds the sunlight. He hit the play button. Schiff's voice filled the chamber. We don't have direct proof yet, but I'm sure we'll find it if we keep digging. Yet that very evening, Kennedy continued, stopping the audio. You went on national TV and told the world you had a smoking gun. That's like telling people you've got a feast when all you have is an empty pot and some imagination. The press gallery was taking notes at a feverish pace, but their facial expressions had shifted. This wasn't the narrative they were prepared to write. But wait, there's more, Kennedy said, adopting the tone of a late-night salesman. Let me ask you something, Congressman. Are you familiar with a man named Dmitry Volkov? Schiff's face drained of color. I don't recall the name. Well, let me jog your memory, Kennedy offered helpfully. Harvard Law, class of 1985. Your roommate for 2 full years and the son of a Russian diplomat. Quite an interesting fellow. He currently works for a Russian state-owned energy firm. You projected your own Russian ties onto others like a movie theater projector. He pulled out a photo of a young Schiff and Volkov at Harvard, arms around each other's shoulders and smiling. In Louisiana, we call that psychological projection. It's like a thief assuming everyone else is stealing. Schiff tried to rally, claiming the committee meetings were confidential. To what are you referring? Kennedy asked innocently. Speaking of secrets, didn't you discuss that exact secret meeting on CNN that same night? He pulled out a tablet and played a clip of Schiff revealing details from the supposedly restricted session to a news anchor. Your memory seems shorter than a politician's promise during an election cycle, Kennedy observed. Or maybe you just believe the rules don't apply to your office. Like my grandmother used to say, rules are for everyone else. The comparison between the official memos was even more devastating. Kennedy laid out 2 documents side by side on the desk, using a ruler to point at specific sections like a schoolteacher. Now, this memo stated the warrant was based on unverified data. You called that a lie. Turns out, it was the truth. This memo said the FBI withheld who funded the research. You said that was false. Turns out, it was gospel. Everything in the opposing memo was verified, Everything in yours was debunked like a fake monster sighting. He looked at Schiff with exaggerated pity. You're striking out while calling yourself the MVP. That's like my cousin claiming he's a professional racer because he drove fast to the grocery store. A Republican senator couldn't hold back a laugh, and even some Democrats were struggling to remain stoic. But here is the best part, Kennedy continued. You spent 3 long years claiming you had the goods. My grandmother always said the rooster who crows the loudest usually hasn't laid an egg. You shouted about Russia from every roof in D.C. and every studio in New York. He paused for dramatic effect before delivering the blow. But your nest is emptier than a hollow log. You didn't have evidence. You had fantasies and a media that wanted to believe them. That isn't a legal investigation. That's creative writing. And frankly, it's not even good fiction. Stephen King writes better monsters, and his are more believable than your proof. Schiff's lead lawyer stood up to object to the characterization. Sit back down, counselor, Kennedy said gently. This isn't a courtroom, and your client isn't under oath. Though given his history with the truth, I'm not sure it would matter. He closed the first folder with a sharp snap. You know what the real tragedy is, Congressman? While you were chasing ghosts and living out your Russia fantasies, real dangers to this country went ignored. Actual corruption went unpunished because you were too busy playing Captain Ahab to your white whale. Kennedy leaned back, studying Schiff like a scientist looking at a strange bug. But don't you worry. We are just getting started. As my grandpappy used to say, when you're draining a swamp, you find the biggest predators at the very bottom. And, sir, we are about to go deep-sea diving into your professional history. He reached for the next file, labeled Whistleblower Scandal in bold lettering. Now, this one is particularly fascinating because it's where you transitioned from being mistaken to being flat-out corrupt. It's the difference between stepping in a puddle and jumping into the mire with both feet. Schiff was visibly perspiring now, despite the air conditioning. His legal team looked like they were reconsidering their career choices. Shall we continue your education, Congressman? Kennedy asked sweetly. After all, you were so concerned about my ignorance. I'm just trying to clear the air. Consider this a free ethics seminar. I know Harvard charged you a fortune, but they clearly missed a few lessons. Let's talk about your little whistleblower associate, Kennedy began, opening the second folder with surgical precision. The one you swore you never met, never coordinated with, and certainly never coached. That one. He pulled out a detailed timeline that resembled a crime scene board. August 12, 2019. Your staff meets with the individual. August 12, 2019. That same person files the formal complaint. Now, I'm not a gambling man, but those odds are longer than a Sunday grocery list. Schiff shifted in his seat, claiming there was no coordination. Hold on now, Kennedy interrupted, pulling out his phone. I'm going to do something a little bit unorthodox right now. I'm going to send a text to that whistleblower this very second. Let's see. Hey, remember those meetings with Schiff's staff? The hearing room went deathly silent. Kennedy's phone buzzed almost instantly. Well, would you look at that? Kennedy said, showing the screen to the cameras. The response says, which time? It seems your friend has a much better memory than you do, Congressman. Schiff's face turned a sickly shade of green. His lawyers were frantically whispering to him. But wait, it gets even better, Kennedy announced, producing a photograph. This was taken at a high-end restaurant in Georgetown. $200 steaks. And look who's having a cozy dinner on August 5th, a week before the complaint. The photo clearly showed Schiff with the young man, leaning in conspiratorially. You coached the witness, and then acted more surprised than a raccoon in a trash can. That's like a fireman starting a blaze just so he can be the hero who puts it out. Kennedy then pulled out a transcript, handling it like a piece of evidence. But the real masterpiece was your parody of the president's phone call. Let me remind everyone. He played the audio of Schiff's dramatic, fictionalized interpretation of the call. Now, let's compare that to what was actually said, Kennedy noted, pulling out the real document. He read them side by side, and the contrast was devastating. You lied on national television, fabricated quotes, and created a dialogue that never happened. In Louisiana, we call that fraud. In California, I guess you call it parody, like calling a heist an unauthorized withdrawal. The press section was in overdrive now. This was not the story they wanted to tell. But here is where it gets truly interesting, Kennedy continued. You suppressed 17 witness testimonies that contradicted your narrative. 17. That's more hidden than a bootlegger's stash. He began reading excerpts from the hidden files, each one dismantling Schiff's case. One ambassador saw no collusion. Another saw nothing illegal. You hid evidence like a squirrel hides nuts, except you did it for power. Kennedy then produced a physical model of the Capitol building and placed it on the desk. And let's discuss your basement bunker. You held secret hearings down there like some kind of comic book villain. Except those villains usually have a point. He used a pointer to show the restricted areas. Behind those doors, you ran a star chamber. Republicans were locked out. Witnesses were coached in secret. And you leaked only what helped you. You turned this building into your own private court. King George would have been impressed. The Founding Fathers are spinning in their graves fast enough to power the whole East Coast. A young Republican congressman shouted in agreement. "Order!" the chairman said, but his heart wasn't in it. The damage was done. Kennedy pulled out one more document. This is an email from your staff to the whistleblower. Subject line, suggested revisions to your complaint. You edited his homework like a teacher with a red pen. Then you had the gall to act shocked when it showed up on your desk. He shook his head sadly. That's like being surprised to find gambling in a casino. My grandmother had a saying, "You can put makeup on a pig, but it's still a pig." You gave this scandal a whole beauty salon treatment, but it still oinks. Schiff tried one last defense, claiming the president was a threat. The only threat here, Kennedy interrupted, is a congressman who thinks he is above the law. You weaponized this committee and made a mockery of due process. He closed the folder with finality. You know what really bothers me? You're a former prosecutor. You know better. It's like a doctor deciding to poison his patients. You didn't just betray your office. You betrayed your ethics and the American people who trusted you to be fair. Kennedy took his time cleaning his glasses again. But I'm just a simple country lawyer. What do I know about complicated things like not lying to the public? Those must be advanced concepts they don't teach in the backwoods. The sarcasm was heavy enough to feel. Ready for the next folder, Congressman, or do you need a break to come up with more excuses? Because the ones you're using now are weaker than gas station coffee. Kennedy reached for the next file with exaggerated care, as if it contained toxic waste. Now, this one requires a strong stomach, he said. It's about your donor, Ed Buck, and the other unsavory characters from your California circle. Fair warning to anyone sensitive. He opened it slowly, revealing photos that made the gallery gasp. Ed Buck, a major donor who gave you over $500,000. He also had a habit of having young men die in his home. 2 bodies, both young men of color. Both died of overdoses in his apartment. And you kept taking his money. Kennedy's voice lost all humor now. Gamal Moore, 26, found dead. Timothy Dean, 55, found dead. And you knew. The whole political establishment knew, but the checks were too good to pass up. He clicked a remote, and a video played on the screens. A woman appeared, tears in her eyes. "My name is Letitia Nixon. My son was killed by Ed Buck. Adam Schiff knew he was dangerous, but they kept protecting him because of the money. My son is dead because they cared more about donations than lives." The room was hauntingly silent. Even Schiff's lawyers stopped whispering. "Did those lives matter less than the cash, Congressman?" Kennedy asked quietly. "Because that's how it looks from here." Schiff finally spoke, claiming he returned the money. "Did you now?" Kennedy interrupted, pulling out FEC records. "According to these filings, you never returned a single cent. Even after the first death, even after the second, the money stayed in your accounts." He looked at Schiff with pure contempt. "Your pants are on fire, Congressman. That's not a saying. That's just a fact." Kennedy pulled out more documents, each one progressively worse than the last. Ed Buck wasn't your only problematic benefactor. Let's discuss the Standard Hotel. You remember that place, don't you? Some very dark things happened there. Why did investigations get shut down? And why did their donations to you spike right after each incident? The questions hung in the air like a heavy fog. In Louisiana, we judge a man by his company. You kept company with predators and degenerates. They gave you money, and you gave them cover. He pulled out a map of LA, covered in red dots. Each dot represents a donor of yours who has been charged with serious crimes. There are 47 dots on this map. You are a magnet for moral bankruptcy. A voice from the crowd shouted about the victims. Kennedy nodded. That's the right question. What about the families destroyed while your campaign coffers grew? He turned back to Schiff. You represent one of the wealthiest districts, yet it has one of the worst homeless crises in the nation. Skid Row is in your backyard. Crime is skyrocketing, and quality of life is cratering. But you're in D.C. getting rich off criminals and lecturing us about ethics. Kennedy pulled out the crime stats. Violent crime up 42%. Your net worth? Up 400%. It seems you're the only thing thriving in your district. You're like a captain who abandoned a burning ship but kept the salary. Schiff tried to call the accusations baseless. Baseless? Kennedy's voice rose for the first time. Tell that to the mothers of the dead. Tell that to the victims of your protected donors. He slammed his hand on the desk, startling the room. Let me ask you directly, and remember that lying here is a federal offense. Did you or did you not know about Ed Buck's activities before those men died? Schiff's lawyers practically tackled him to whisper in his ear. After a long silence, Schiff spoke carefully. I invoke my Fifth Amendment rights. The room erupted. You're pleading the Fifth about your knowledge of criminal activities? Kennedy asked in disbelief. Well, that's more honesty than we've seen all day. At least now we know where you hide. He closed the folder with disgust. The saddest part is those young men were someone's sons, but to you, they were disposable. Their lives were worth less than a campaign contribution. Kennedy took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. My mother taught me not to speak ill of people, but she also taught me to tell the truth. And the truth is, you have blood on your hands. Maybe not legally, that's for others to decide. But morally, you're as guilty as sin. He looked around the room, making eye contact with everyone. This is what corruption looks like. It's not just money. It's the human cost. It's choosing power over people and principles. Kennedy reached for the next file. Speaking of choosing money over country, let's talk about your Chinese connections. Because if you thought the last folder was bad, wait until you see who else has been funding your career. Before we dive in, I need to establish a pattern. You and Eric Swalwell are like two peas in a pod. Except Eric got caught in a honey trap, and you just got caught in a money trap. He opened the Chinese connections file with the reverence of a historian. It's amazing how many of your donors have ties to the CCP. It's a who's who of Beijing influence. Kennedy pulled out a complex financial web. One donor gave $58,000. He sits on boards of companies owned by the Chinese government. Another gave $75,000. Her husband runs a Chinese state bank. Should I keep going? Schiff's lawyers were frantically taking notes. But here is the real kicker, Kennedy said, leaning in. Then, without warning, he spoke in perfect Mandarin Chinese. Can you understand what I am saying to you right now, Congressman? The room went totally silent. Everyone stared at Schiff, who started to respond in Mandarin before stopping himself. His mouth was frozen in horror. You have some interesting language skills there, Congressman, Kennedy observed, switching back to his English drawl. Where did you learn that? And why did you understand my question about your handlers? The press section exploded. This was the headline. But wait, it gets better. Kennedy pulled out his phone. Let's see what Chinese state media is saying. An article published 47 minutes ago says, Congressman Schiff defends China's interests against racist attacks. They are cheering for you in real time. You're their most valuable puppet. Kennedy then produced bank records that painted a very clear, damning picture of his voting record. Every time you voted against sanctions, there was a deposit. Every time you killed a bill critical of Beijing, there was a deposit. You're more reliable than a Swiss watch if that watch was made in China. He displayed a timeline of votes and corresponding payments. A vote against Uyghur sanctions followed by $25,000 to your wife's firm. Killing Taiwan defense legislation followed by $40,000 in speaking fees. Those are just coincidences, Schiff protested weakly. Son, if those are coincidences, then I'm the Emperor of China. The only thing coincidental here is how every pro-China vote makes you wealthier. He pulled out declassified intelligence reports. The FBI says Chinese media has mentioned you favorably over 800 times. They've mentioned me 0 times. I wonder why that is. Could it be because I don't vote the way they want? Kennedy then delivered another shock. You know who else is interesting? Senator Feinstein. Her driver for 20 years was a spy. You both knew. You protected each other in a pact of mutual destruction of American interests. He showed the briefing logs. The FBI briefs you on Chinese influence, and the next month you vote against security measures. You call concerns xenophobic. That isn't oversight, that's looking the other way. The pattern was undeniable. Every anti-China bill died in your committee. You're as consistent as grits at breakfast, always serving Beijing. He pulled out testimony from a defector. A former intelligence officer says you are considered a reliable asset for shaping policy. Even they think you're their boy. That's outrageous, Schiff yelled. You know what's outrageous? Selling out American workers and technology for cash, Kennedy countered. In Louisiana, we say if you lie down with dogs, you get up with fleas. You've been in bed with the CCP, and sir, you are infested. He pulled out one final piece of evidence. This is the most damning part. After classified briefings on Chinese threats, your portfolio shows you bought Chinese stocks. You literally bet against your own country. That's not just corrupt. It's borderline treasonous. The word hung in the air like thunder. I'm not saying you're an agent, Kennedy clarified. "I'm saying you vote like one and profit like one. If it walks and quacks like a duck, it's a duck." He closed the folder. "It burns my soul to see American factories close while you get rich. You're supposed to represent California, not Beijing. But I guess it's hard to tell the difference when you're cashing checks from both." He reached for the media manipulation folder. "Let's talk about how you corrupted the free press. A lying congressman is bad, but one who uses the media to spread those lies is a different level of swamp creature. My uncle Beauregard had a boat that leaked terrible. That boat was more watertight than your office." He pulled out a stack of papers 6 inches thick. "By my count, your office was the source of 438 unauthorized leaks. That's a lot of holes in the ship." He laid out the evidence. These weren't accidents. They were timed for maximum damage. You turned intelligence into clickbait. Suddenly, Kennedy's phone buzzed. He looked at it with theatrical delight. "Well, speak of the devil. Look at this, folks." He held it up to the cameras. A text from a major news anchor. "What's my opinion supposed to be today, Adam?" The room erupted as Schiff lunged for his own phone. "Are you trying to warn them?" Kennedy asked. "Too late. That wasn't really from the anchor. It was my staff using a spoofed number. But your reaction just proved you coordinate talking points." Schiff turned purple. He'd been played. "But we have real proof, too," Kennedy continued, playing a hot mic audio clip of Schiff directing a host on what to say. "So you aren't just leaking, you're the conductor of the orchestra." Kennedy pulled out records of speaking fees from media companies totaling millions. "You turned this work into a profit center. P.T. Barnum would be proud." The evidence of fake news was even worse. He showed original documents versus what Schiff gave the media. You changed meeting to secret meeting. You changed discussion to conspiracy. You edit evidence like a script doctor. He pulled out a binder of over 100 instances of altered documents. You don't spin the truth. You put it in a blender. He looked at the journalists in the room. Some of you are victims. Some are accomplices. But you all got played by a man who thinks facts are optional. Kennedy produced a dictionary. "I brought this to help. Journalism means gathering and presenting news. It doesn't mean taking dictation from Adam Schiff." The press section was very quiet now. But here is the kicker. We tracked your leaks against market movements. Every time you leaked, certain people made millions. Want to guess who they were connected to? Your donors, your allies. You didn't just leak for politics. You leaked for profit. That's criminal. He played a montage of Schiff contradicting himself on different networks. "In Louisiana, we call that a liar. In California, you call it strategy." He closed the folder. "The First Amendment exists because we need the truth. You turned it into a propaganda machine." Kennedy cleaned his glasses again. "Jefferson said he'd prefer newspapers without a government over a government without newspapers. But he assumed they would tell the truth." He reached for the impeachment coup folder. "What you did to the Constitution was an armed robbery of our foundation. You turned the Capitol basement into a kangaroo court. Republicans were locked out, and due process died in that dark room. An Ohio congressman shouted his agreement. But let's talk about witness coaching." Kennedy played a video of a star witness confessing that Schiff's staff told him what to say and threatened his career if he didn't comply. The room was in a state of shock. Schiff's lawyers were panicking. "That's been edited," Schiff screamed. "Well, the witness is ready to testify in public today," Kennedy noted. He pulled out a pocket constitution. "Pop quiz. What does it say about impeachment? Don't Google it. Schiff glared but recited the line about high crimes and misdemeanors. "Show me where it says mean tweets," Kennedy challenged. "You made up rules like a child. You broke every precedent in American history." He showed a chart comparing this process to every other impeachment. Even Bill Clinton's trial looked fair compared to yours. You claim to defend democracy while acting like a dictator. Stalin would be proud. He turned to Schiff with genuine anger. "Real crimes go unpunished while you play games. Hamilton warned us about this 200 years ago. He saw you coming." He closed the folder. "You used the Constitution as toilet paper. You turned the people's house into your playhouse." He stood up and faced the cameras. "What you saw wasn't impeachment. It was a coup in a suit. It was a partisan hit job." He sat back down and reached for the final folder. The grand finale. The room was transformed. The smug media and confident Democrats were gone, replaced by a somber realization. Schiff was slumped and shaking. His legal team had dwindled as lawyers walked away. Kennedy opened the last file. "We've covered a lot today. Your career is like a house of cards. One breath of truth, and it falls." He pulled out a financial disclosure. In 2015, you were worth $500,000. In 2023, you're worth $4.5 million. That's an 800% jump. Public service pays well, doesn't it? Suddenly, Schiff's chief counsel stood up. "Mr. Chairman, I can no longer represent this man. Ethical duties prevent me from continuing." He walked out, leaving Schiff stranded. "When the rats leave, the ship is sinking," Kennedy observed. Schiff finally snapped, screaming that it was a setup. "It's called consequences," Kennedy corrected. "Your chickens have come home to roost." A Democratic congresswoman stood up and agreed, saying she couldn't be complicit in the corruption any longer. Schiff was broken. Kennedy pulled out criminal referrals for perjury, leaking, obstruction, and wire fraud. 98 federal charges in total. You're in more trouble than a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs. Kennedy stood up to leave. You had potential, but you chose lies and profit. Future generations will study you as a warning. He delivered the final blow with a smile. Bless your heart, Congressman. When you're in prison, maybe you can finally read that ethics thesis. The room was silent as Schiff was helped from his chair, his career in ruins. That accent you mocked, it just ended you. Kennedy packed his bag and told the cameras that this is what accountability looks like. To my people in Louisiana, thank you. Sometimes it takes an outsider to clean the inside. Today was a victory for the truth. Justice, served with Southern wisdom and a bless your heart, had never tasted so sweet. 3 months later, Schiff was behind bars, and the Kennedy Standard became the new rule for accountability in Washington. As Kennedy's uncle said, you can't beat the truth when John Kennedy is holding the folders. It turns out, the slow-talking man from the South was the sharpest mind in the room all along.